We are here and we are live. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night right here, hanging out. Like Jay Cutler says, we're just hanging out before he gets kicked out of another Denver bar. It is the Audible Live. Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, Gene Bramel here to talk about the world of the National Football League with you. And as always, have a good time doing it. We thank everyone for watching our YouTube hangouts here at youtube.com/footballguys.com. We also thank everyone for checking out the Audible on iTunes and Stitcher Radio as well. So we're hot and heavy with a lot of NFL talk as OTAs continue around the National Football League. And as I go through and intro everybody, first up, of course, you know him, you love him, at Sigmund Bloom on Twitter. He is Bloom. Bloom, baby, a big week for me personally. I don't know how you would rank these in order, though.
Okay.
20-year project coming to fruition as my comic book is printed and ready to be released. Bryn Renner agreeing to basically be my son's quarterback coach for the summer, which is awesome. And Jene, who I talked about last week on the show, friend requesting me on Facebook. So a big week in the Lammey household, Bloom.
Yeah, wow, those are very different and very hard to rank. I think the comic book is the most impressive because of the dedication. Because I can't stay with things for 20 hours, so 20 years, and I suggest, and off air, folks, I was that guy. I said I'm going to get an autographed copy of Gravis #1. Maybe I'm just saying, maybe the Audible audience, we've given away things on Audible before, but an autographed copy of Gravis #1. I'm being that guy and putting you on the spot right now.
That would be pretty cool. We'll have to check that out as well. You know him, you love him. He's an author of something massive. It is the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. He is Matt Waldman. Matt, putting the fantasy in fantasy football. What's up, baby?
Man, all I can say is that item number 3 on your list, you might need an RSP as a pillow and Bryn Renner's couch to stay on. I don't know how good that is on the family.
I hear you on that. You know him, you love him, and you can follow him on Twitter at Gene Bramel. He's that guy that strolls into the party late, and he's like, "What's up? How's it going?" He's Gene Bramel. Gene, what's up, man?
I am actually the guy that comes to the party 15 minutes early and wonders where everybody else is.
That
then
sounds
complains. And when I show up late, I complain that I didn't get my invite on time. So
JB time.
And there you go. We got a lot to get to on tonight's show. We've got some Twitter questions lined up. We'll get to those towards the end of the show, and so much to get to. Honestly, I sent out the rundown earlier today. We're probably not going to get to all of it, but we'll do our damnedest. Before we jump in, I want to let you know about the Football Guys Players Championship, the $2 million prize pool, the 2014 Football Guys Players Championship, the FPC. How high can I lift this without you knowing I'm reading it? Is awarding a record $2 million prize pool, making it the largest $350 entry event by a substantial margin. The 2014 FPC will offer the best ever grand prize of $300,000. Championship round prizes are expanded down to the 650th place. League prizes are $2,000 with $1,500 for first place and $500 for second. Entries are capped at 7,500 teams, and all prizes are guaranteed. The entire prize pool is escrowed for the ultimate in prize protection. Listen, you play high-stakes fantasy football, you don't want to win and then have the company say, soon, just hold on. No, you don't get that. With the FPC entirely escrowed, the prize pool, you get your money right away. It's simply the best in high-stakes fantasy football. The 2014 Football Guys Players Championship drafts will begin on Saturday, July 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern and run all the way to Thursday, September 4th, right before the opening kickoff. The entry fee remains the same at $350 per team and 3 teams for $1,000, and the new software will automatically discount every third team by $50. Register to play right now. And go to footballguys.com and check out everything that we have going on at footballguys.com. There is no off-season, only an on-playing season. We are in it. We are ramping up, as Sigmund said last night on the IDP Roundtable. And we are jumping in to some news that maybe isn't that shocking right off the bat. And we're into off-season training activities. And surprise, surprise, Dr. Gene, Cleveland Browns running back Ben Tate is nicked up. at minicamp this week. You've got rookie Terrence West behind him saying he wants to start. Of course, our favorite guy there, Isaiah Crowell, in the mix as well. But Tate already nicked up. We go back to the same story with this guy, Dr. Jene. What are your thoughts here, and how do fantasy owners approach this when considering Tate for their fantasy squad?
I think it's a concern. We don't know yet whether or not it's something important. It's just being called a minor injury, but he was held out of more than one workout in a critical time to show the coaches what he can do with a couple of guys they brought on board in West and Crowell that's going to compete. And as I'm looking at the whole list of things that Ben Tate has been involved on the injury report for, went on injured reserve when he was a rookie for his ankle injury, and I'm seeing quad, back, hip, groin, ankle, foot, shoulder, head, toe, hamstring, foot, shoulder, elbow, ribs. I mean, put your right foot in, take your right foot out. It's the hokey pokey of injuries here. A lot of these things he was listed as probable for, but, he's missed time with hamstring injuries, missed time with groin injuries, missed time with ankle injuries, and the rib problem last year that finally put him on IR. That's not to say that, same thing that I always like to say about injury-prone players. It's more of a retrospective term. It's a descriptor of what's gone on in the past rather than a definite prediction of what might happen in the future. But when you see a list of over 4 years of all of these things, and that was, I wasn't repeating those just to be repeating them. I was reading from top to bottom what he's been on the injury report for. It has to be a concern. Hopefully he's ready to go in training camp. He makes it through camp healthy and is ready to go. But, unlike a lot of times doing OTAs and early in camp where I say this probably isn't that big a deal, it's just another sign that Tate's going to struggle to stay on the field for you.
It's a sign that you don't want to see at this time of year. We're going to stick in Cleveland, and we're going to go to the Cleveland guy on the show. Of course, it is Matt Waldman. Matt, Brian Hoyer in that quarterback competition. Now, we've got a buy or sell on Johnny Manziel that actually came from a caller to my ESPN radio show. It had a question that I thought was fascinating to determine with Johnny Manziel. So we've got plenty to talk about with the Cleveland quarterback situation, but as of right now, they're saying that Brian Hoyer is showing maturity, of course, at the position. ESPNCleveland.com reports that Mike Pettin, head coach there, says that, hey, Manziel is a little bit late with his reads and his throws, what you'd expect. He's only been in the offense a month and a half. However, he went on to praise Hoyer for that elite anticipation. In talking to Aaron Goldhammer with ESPNCleveland.com, Hoyer, that hometown hero, is a high school quarterback there, a guy that the fan base completely gets behind, looked really good last year before the injury, showing maturity, and with the anticipation that he has, when you hear this news item and you read the news item, Matt, what are your thoughts on Brian Hoyer? And how long? We know Manziel's time is coming at some point, but how long can Hoyer hang on?
It's shocking news. I mean, he played with Tom Brady, behind Tom Brady, and when Tim Tebow mania came around and they said, what do you think about Tim Tebow coming to town? He's like, fine with me. It'll be fun to compete with him. But it was kind of more like bring it on because he's not beating me. That was basically kind of the tone that Hoyer had. And Hoyer's always been that way. I think that since his days at Michigan State, he was an underrated prospect, and he was someone that I thought it was kind of surprising he bounced around as much as he did. And when he finally did get a chance in Cleveland, he showed he showed that excellent anticipation. You could see it in the 3 games that he played in. And so when you look at this, it's really not a surprise to me that he's mature. He's had to weather a lot to be able to get his opportunity, and he's someone that understands really what it means to earn this. Johnny Manziel doesn't understand that yet. Now, we're going to get to some of those things about his maturity and whether or not, some people are overblowing the fact that, what he's doing. But the fact is he's just a younger guy, so in most cases, not all, he's less mature than a guy like Brian Hoyer. He's also had things handed to him more than Brian Hoyer has at this point in their pro careers. In terms of, Manziel's going to make the squad. Brian Hoyer was no guarantee to ever make a squad, with the team. So you're going to see that with him. When it comes to how long Hoyer's going to be in the lineup, I think that really depends on how good Manziel plays, as well as how healthy Hoyer can stay. If Hoyer can stay healthy and the Browns are winning, they are not going to put Johnny Manziel in the game. If they get to the playoffs, Manziel's not going to be in there. they would have to have we're talking about a 10-6 season probably, or fighting for the opportunity to become close to that. But if they start out 0-5 and Hoyer's making mistakes, of course they're going to put Manziel in at some point. I think that's more of a given. But I think that really the whole thing isn't up to Hoyer's ability. It's really up to whether the Browns are winning, and really if he can stay healthy. And if they're winning and staying healthy, he stays in. I'd say if they're 500 or close to, or a little below 500, and the play is a little, plays a little bit shakier, or he's getting beat up a lot, and they're not able to protect him, and they're afraid that he's either going to get hurt or that he's not being able to make the plays that they need to, then they may look to Manziel to provide that running element if they think that they have a chance to win some games or stay in the mix.
Matt, yeah, go ahead, Bloom. Jump in here, and I've got to bring up a point that Goldhammer also said. So Sigmund, chime in here on this Manziel Hoyer situation.
Yeah, and if you say Goldhammer, I feel like it's going to be like a James Bond theme, like Goldhammer. Dun, dun, dun. I think that we need to transport ourselves back to week 3, week 4, week 5 of last year, because let's not underestimate Brian Hoyer's ability to just hold on to this job, because he came into a team that had, I would say, the worst offense in the league. They had the worst offense in the league the first 2 weeks of the season. I mean, maybe the Jags were worse, but the Jags just were still, they had to be reminded the season had started. They had just traded away Trent Richardson, so that was kind of the white flag for the season. And Hoyer was coming in because they had finally given up on Whedon. They went to Minnesota and won. Then Cincinnati came to town, and they thoroughly beat them. And remember, this was with Chris Ogbonnaya was their number 1 running back at the time. Willis McGahee was getting 8 carries for 9 yards. I mean, Chris Ogbonnaya was their most productive running back. And Josh Gordon had just come back from a 2-game suspension. Like, nobody knew what he was going to do. And Hoyer electrified the team, electrified the city, and then, of course, we knew it's Cleveland, so in Week 5 on Thursday night against Buffalo, he tears his ACL. But we don't know how his season would have gone if he hadn't done that. We very well could be talking about, hey, Cleveland doesn't need a quarterback, right? Or at least they don't have to draft a quarterback because of how Hoyer played, certainly if he kept playing the way he played in those first 2 games. So I think it's way too early. And he's not Matt Castle. He's not somebody that we've already seen and know exactly what he is.
Well, and you look at Brian Hoyer and what he did last year and what he could do going forward, you get excited about it. Also, nobody threw the ball more than Cleveland last year. So from a fantasy standpoint, if they take a somewhat similar stance, which under Kyle Shanahan now, you'll see some play action. That's something that's enticing. We've got a news item later on in Buy or Sell about our guy, Young Baby Hawk. But I want to go back to you, Matt, quickly on this. In talking to Goldhammer, who is ESPNCleveland.com most succulent talk show host, that's what his Twitter profile says, he suggested something that happened with Tom Landry, with Roger Staubach and Craig Morton, something that happened with Jimmy Johnson, with Troy Aikman and Steve Walsh, something that happened with Dan Reeves, with Tommy Maddox and Sean Moore, rotating quarterbacks. That is a thought by some that it could happen. It's been disaster anytime anyone's tried it. And I talked about some luminaries there, Matt, in Landry, Johnson, and Reeves. Rotating quarterbacks or having a Manziel package? Your thoughts there, Matt?
Okay, well, to start with, I think that, yeah, I mean, when you think about it as maybe them getting an even split or a significant split, and it's a rotation that's that even, then yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. It's not a good idea. But you can look at successful situations like, say, Steve McNair and Chris Chandler, and where Chris Chandler actually played the majority of the game, but there would be a couple of situations where they would put McNair in and give him packages, and it wasn't just, they weren't just let's say Cordell Stewart type packages that came on early, and then they expanded it where it's like, run Cordell, run, oh look, he threw a pass, it's a novelty. It was like, for McNair they literally let him to develop. They weren't just using him as or like the Jets with Brad Smith. It wasn't like, oh, he's coming to the game, we know what he's going to do, let's pound him. And now it's 3rd and 7. But I think with Manziel, if they do it intelligently and they pick certain plays that are going to give him a chance to make a read, make a throw, make an adjustment, and it's not just, you have this one situation, and if it doesn't work, create. It's if they stay away from that, then I think then it could be helpful to them. But otherwise, yeah, it's probably not the best thing. I do have one last thing I want to ask Gene about Tate as a follow-up, because I read in the Sports Illustrated article about him last year that he literally asked the doctors to remove screws from his ankle, even against their wishes, because the screws bothered him. And they recommended against that type of thing. So I'm wondering, just from Gene's perspective, knowing that type of situation, I'm sure Gene will probably say, well, we need to know more than just that. But if you can speculate a little bit more on it, it would be fun, just because that's just what reporters like to ask. So yeah, we know what your answer is going to be, but we still want you to speculate because we want to hear a quote.
I don't know if I can do better than the hokey pokey quote, but I'll try. Yeah, most orthopedic surgeons prefer not to take out the screw, because by doing that you're leaving a defect in the bone behind, and that area is a little bit weaker. So depending on when he made that request, if it was closer to the season, they'd be a lot more reluctant than maybe earlier in the off season. But those plates, screws, nails, whatever there may be, and they don't do nails anymore, it's usually plates and screws, but those things are generally not taken out unless it's really impacting function. So if he was feeling pain but it wasn't impacting his function that much, it's probably the reason they turned him down. Is that a sign that his pain tolerance isn't what it could be? Is it a sign that he's nervous about his past injuries? I think both of those are maybe valid questions. The pain tolerance issue was probably laid to rest a little bit because he did try to play through those multiple broken ribs toward the end of last year on a team that wasn't going anywhere, knowing again that he was in a contract year. Maybe that had something to do with it, but I think those are all valid questions to ask. But I think there's good reasons for the surgeons to not want to take those out.
Yeah, they had him take it out though.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
So he had them do it? Yeah. So it's probably, do you remember what time of year it was when that happened? I would imagine it had given him enough time for that area to heal up so he wouldn't have a weak area in that ankle, I would guess.
Yeah, I would guess so too. I just remember that the article came out mid-season while he was playing with those broken ribs. It was a Peter King piece, I believe, where they profiled this, and they were mentioning the fact that he asked to have the plates removed, and I think it was in the spring.
Yeah, there was always reluctance about that, especially in the situation of an elite athlete like this, where that area is going to be under stress. But it's not that uncommon to have those taken out. It's more uncommon with the elite athletes for the reasons we talked about. But if you or I went in and said, this screw is giving me a lot of trouble, it's pain, I'm gimping around on it, it'd be much more likely for us to undergo that procedure than an athlete.
And there we go. We'll move on. One more news item is kind of a favorite around here. Mike Evans signs his contract today. Bloom, I just wanted to pick your brain about Evans in that offense. We talked last week about something that was then debunked later on with another report in Tampa. They're not going to split that many carries for Doug Martin and Charles Sims, but into the passing game, whether it's McCown or Glennon, and that it was interesting to note that Arizona was one of the teams sniffing around Glennon, but right. Vincent Jackson there, of course. Mike Evans now signed. Your thoughts on the Rook?
Yeah, I think that he has as high of a ceiling probably as any rookie. I mean, maybe Kelvin Benjamin a little bit higher, but certainly when we get to that 8th, 9th round area of redraft leagues and you're looking for upside at any position, Evans presents it. He's going to get the lesser corner of the two between him and Vincent Jackson. The one obstacle might be teaching an old dog new tricks, in so much that Lovie Smith is not exactly a barnstormer when you think of his offensive units on his teams. Jeff Tedford, who knows what, he's kind of like crawling out of the crypt or something like that, to get back into the NFL. And I mean, to get in the NFL and try to make an impact as an offensive coordinator, not really ramping up to that, just jumping right in. The pieces are there. Josh McCown, there's some unknowns, but if those pieces fall into place, there's no reason Mike Evans won't 900 yards, 1,000 yards, 6-7 touchdowns. I mean, which is wide receiver 3 type numbers. I think that's certainly within his reach.
And certainly something fantasy owners should be keeping an eye on is the big, talented rookie Mike Evans. We now get to the portion of the program which we call buy or sell. I'm going to list some topics. We're going to go through and either say we're going to buy it or we're going to sell it. Bloom, I'm going to bounce back to you, and I bounce back to you with a heavy heart, because this is a guy that We talked about plenty when he came out of Alabama, and it was a miss. And listen, when you do these things, when you are an analyst, when you analyze players and you project what they could be as pros, you're going to have hits and you're going to have misses. And if you ever see anyone, whether it's in person or on Twitter, saying, I never miss on anybody, then they're lying. We missed on Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram now saying that he's more focused in a contract year. This one's coming from NOLA.com, saying he showed increased focus in off-season practices this year and has been more intense during workouts during his contract year. They had the opportunity with the fifth-year option, Bloom, to pick it up. They declined to do that. You've got Kyrie Robinson there, kind of waiting in the wings, as well as the old man Pierre Thomas. Your thoughts, Bloom, buying or selling Mark Ingram being more focused in this contract year?
Yeah, and you missed a chance there, Cease, to bring up stupid, sexy Flanders, too, Flanders.
Of course, Timmy.
So, I will say this. Mark Ingram in the second half of the year last year did look like a different running back. He ran with incredible urgency and effort on every touch. He ran like his life depended on it. And perhaps he wasn't healthy enough in those first 2 years to maybe that was always in him. So I can buy that. I still don't think he's going to have enough of a role carved out to be a consistent fantasy. He's a by emergency injury type guy. Likewise with Kyrie Robinson. But you see these guys as twins. Which one is more likely to fall off by the wayside, and which one's more likely to emerge? It's probably Robinson because of Ingram's last few years as far as durability and consistency. So, Ingram worth a flyer when you get past the 10th round, sure. See what happens the first few weeks. Maybe he does continue to run like his life depends on it and put up some fantasy points or be trade bait or something like that. But I still think that he's a limited player. He's not going to be a receiver out of the backfield. He's not going to just push. He's not going to be so good that they're going to leave Kyrie Robinson on the bench. It's going to be New Orleans style, and they're going to run through. And by the way, I'm going to go back to something, Cease, real quick. I'm glad that you clarified that it was Aaron Goldhammer's Twitter profile that said he was the most succulent, because that is something that I think you could have, just conjured up on your own.
Yeah, well, yes, of course, about Aaron Goldhammer. Just the name alone is succulent in and of itself. We need to get a special intro dropped for him. Mark Ingram, new focus, and there's those receptions that Bloom talked about, the 70 receptions. That's not going to be there from Darren Sproles. Dr. Jene, I'm going to throw this one to you. Mark Ingram, more focused. Are you buying or selling that this season going forward?
I'll buy that he's more focused. He's in a contract year, and at the running back position nowadays, it's not necessarily that you're playing for your first and maybe only big contract. It's also, with all of the movement that goes on at this position and the way it's relatively undervalued, you may be playing for a roster spot next year if you're not capable enough, and whether that's with New Orleans or somebody else's remains to be seen. So I think, carrying on the trend of the end of last year, I think I'll definitely buy that he's more focused going through OTAs in the preseason to try to make his mark this year. Whether or not that translates into enough statistical value to have fantasy value remains to be seen. I think we've all been burned enough with Ingram that it's going to be hard for any of us to pull the trigger in that particular offense with the guys surrounding him at this point, earlier than the 10th round, as Bloom says. But I think there's no reason to suspect that he's not focused at this point.
Well, I look at Mark Ingram's average draft position in 12-team PPR. It's running back 55 and 1308, right after Ahmad Bradshaw, but before guys like Sean Green. And listen, nobody's falling all over themselves with Sean Green. First, he's got to be healthy, but he could easily outperform what we see Mark Ingram do. Also, in front of some favorites from this show, Charles Sims, C.J. Anderson, even in front of Jonathan Stewart. Matt, I toss it to you. Buy or sell that ADP, and buy or sell Lance Dunbar, Mark Ingram being more focused this year.
Well, I'm selling that he's more focused this year because I thought he was focused last year. So I don't think that it's new and improved upon new and improved in this situation. Really, what this is Mark Ingram is praying, not really. Mark Ingram, in the back of his mind, would never admit this, but in the back of his mind, he's hoping that one of his teammates doesn't perform well or gets hurt so that he can have an opportunity to do well enough that in free agency he can get an opportunity like Michael Turner did. That's basically his absolute idealistic hope is that he can go somewhere and become a lead back and play to his potential. And does he have that potential? I think he does. I think he showed enough during the season last year. He seemed to be one swipe away, one tackle away, one step away from breaking long runs at least twice a game in every game that I watched. And he was, he looked fantastic, and the Saints screwed up last year in the playoffs because they basically didn't stick with their run game, because Sean Payton and Drew Brees, their whatever you want to call it, ego, game plan, hubris, stubbornness, they decided that they were going to throw when the run was working, and they could have worn teams down and could have kept the game close. And I think that Ingram is good enough that certainly, if Kyrie Robinson gets hurt, Brandon Cooks gets hurt, and those 70 receptions go by the wayside and they have to run the ball a little bit more, then Ingram can be a factor. But I agree with everyone that Kyrie Robinson is probably a better talent, or in terms of his speed and agility, and the fact that he's cheaper and he's younger. And that's really what it comes down to here. Because if Mark Ingram were cheaper and younger and Kyrie Robinson, it was switched a little bit, I'm sure they'd let Kyrie Robinson go, even though Kyrie Robinson is capable of having a really, really good career down the line here. But I think it's a matter of really about cost, and age. So the way I look at this, he's not going, his ADP isn't something that I would look at and say it's worth a shot. Like, to me, I mean, you look at those players that are around him, certainly you can say that, sure, Sean Green might have a little bit more of an opportunity. Maybe C.J. Anderson does, but you still have enough questions about Hillman. You still have enough questions about Bishop Sankey. You can look at, the possibility that there might be a committee, or that these teams might throw more if the other guys get hurt. So, to me, at that late of a stage, Ingram is probably an okay pick. I think he's going to drop some more, so I'd say I'd sell the ADP, because he's going to probably drop to the 15th, 16th round. And if he doesn't, it will be because of an injury to somebody else. And if that happens, his ADP will probably be worth taking him, even if it goes a little bit higher, even to 9 or 10.
Well, let's stick with the running back discussion as buy or sell continues here on the Audible Live, and we'll go to New England and talk about what Albert Breer is reporting, Bloom, that Stephen Ridley is in better shape, appears to be lighter and faster this offseason as he enters the final year of his rookie deal. And to me, Bloom, I would buy the fact that he looks like he's in better shape. Okay, Breer's there, he's observing things. He could look lighter and faster. Awesome. What I'm going to sell, Bloom, is the fact that is he going to hang on to the rock, or is he going to find himself in the Belichick's doghouse again and removed from the starting lineup? Insert Brandon Bolden, whoever, more Shane Vereen, a dash of James White. They've got other options if Ridley can't prove that he can hang on to the ball. Bloom, buy or sell the Stephen Ridley in better shape and so focused in that contract year?
Stephen Ridley in the 7th round, that's about where he's going now. I mean, I can be talked into buying that. And one of the things I think we need when we're looking at the Stephen Ridley situation is remembering that when he wasn't fumbling last year, he still looked really good. I mean, he had a great initial burst, great vision, or at least efficiency, and fit in well what they were trying to do. And if New England really was possibly ready to just move on completely from him, and I think that they could move on from him next year, he and Vereen both, for that matter, because they're both going to be free agents, and we haven't heard anything, impending about signing those guys to extensions, nor should they be, because Ridley has to prove he can hold on to the ball, Vereen has to prove he can stay healthy. So I think that they didn't re-sign LeGarrette Blount. They didn't take a running back. I mean, running backs were super cheap in this draft. They took James White, who maps more to the Shane Vereen role than the Stephen Ridley role. So they aren't showing me with personnel moves that they're worried about Stephen Ridley this year. Now, perhaps, as you said, maybe that points us to Brandon Bolden or someone like Steven Houston if he makes the team. But otherwise, Ridley ran well. And his fumbles last year, I think maybe the first one was egregious. There might have been one other one that was bad. A couple of them were good fumbles. I can remember distinctly during games when Ridley would fumble and get benched last year. It happened enough that I can remember it pretty well. That I would say that's not. I mean, guys are going to fumble sometimes. I mean, there's good defensive players in the NFL. Sometimes you just get that helmet hit right on the ball. It happens. And I know I see Matt styling and profiling there. You've done some great rants on why it's really stupid to play these head games with guys that fumble. So I don't see any fatal flaws in the way Ridley. It's like he holds the ball out there like a loaf of bread or something. And he still can be a 15 to 20 carry a game, 10 touchdown back. So I think we could easily, in the second or third week of the season, see him rip off a couple of games like that and say, why were we overthinking this? As long as he doesn't have a spate of 3 or 4 fumbles in a short period of time, he's going to be the best fantasy back in non-PPR leagues. And Shane Vereen still hearing that his wrist is not healed yet. Maybe the most valuable back on the team.
I love when Bloom gets animated. That's so awesome to see the animation.
Yeah.
Dr. Gene, I'm going to throw this to you because why do I get concerned? I won't say worried. When Monte Ball adds weight and he's up to 220 and his upper body looks much larger, that's fine. I get that. I understand that. And I think I'm going to blame Ricky Waters, actually, years ago with Seattle, Dr. Gene, when he lost, I think it was like 10 pounds, something you guys may remember, and we heard the quotes in training, I'm in the best shape ever, I'm so awesome, and then he got hurt. Lighter, quicker, I understand that. It's still something in the back of my mind to go, I don't want the light Stephen Ridley. I want the banger. I want the banger between the tackles, Stephen Ridley. Dr. Gene, your thoughts here?
I want the player that's comfortable at the weight he's currently at. So was the weight change something the coaches asked him to do to fit a different role than he's used to, that he's comfortable with? Or is this something that he chose to do on his own, that he feels like he can do the same things he was doing in the past at his new weight? And we talked about one of the ways that we can, and it's hard for us because we don't get, Cecil, you may in Denver, but we don't always get a good look at exactly what these guys' frames are. But I don't worry so much about players gaining and losing weight if they've got the frame to support whatever they're trying to do. So yes, if they need that extra weight as some bulk to protect them from injury, it's good. If they can add weight without overtaxing their frame, it's okay. But I think, kind of as a default, what I always want to know, did the coaches ask them to do this to fit something, and then does it fit their frame? So I don't know that I know the answer to that question with Ridley, whether or not his weight changes are due to something that he specifically wanted to do, and whether he did it over a certain period of time where he did it well with good nutrition and everything else or not. Those things probably remain to be seen, but those are the things that I like to think about when we start discussing the weight changes.
Matt, time to rant. Your thoughts, Stephen Ridley, with this lighter, quicker version of himself.
Well, I think to start with, you look at what Gene said, and I think if we could ascertain whether Stephen Ridley is a client of Travell Gaines, and maybe we could ask Travell Gaines, who knows his stuff, about whether or not Stephen Ridley has the frame to add weight or not. And I think that if someone like him said it's true, that it could happen, and that would work, and he's worked with them, then that would be positive. But until we know that, it's a guessing game. As far as the fumbles go, yeah, I dislike teams that really that seem to just jerk players off the field and then bench them for the rest of the time when they fumble, and it's a situation where it's not completely careless. We look at David Wilson, we look at Tom Coughlin and how he did things. We look at other teams, and there are certain situations where you just kind of let players play through it if they have special ability. Adrian Peterson fumbled more than just about anybody on this earth when it came to, well, not that long, but certainly he had a ton of fumbles. I thought he had something like 18 or 19 fumbles in his first 3 years. It was an insanely high number. And they let him play through it. Yeah, they put him on the bench for a series or two and let him get his composure back. But they put him right back out there because they knew what they had, and they wanted to keep this guy's confidence high. I think that you need to do that with special backs and give them a chance. Now, if they make stupid mistakes, then that's a time that you probably have to pull them. But now I'm saying all this based on what I see in a game. We don't know what Stephen Ridley is doing in practice. We don't know what his behavior is like that may also contribute to these issues. Maybe they see also a careless player who doesn't think well and process things well and is a slow learner or is stubborn about certain things, and the fumbles are just the icing on the cake. It also could just be that the team has a very hard and fast rule about certain things, and they have those and if you cross that line, whatever it is, you're gone. I mean, the story, there was a story that Randy Moss and Adalius Thomas, that when they were basically trying to get to a meeting, you're never supposed to be late to an NFL meeting. That's like, that's one of the worst things that can possibly happen to you. These guys were late apparently because of a snowstorm and trying to drive there. And not much longer after that, those two guys were not in New England, and Randy Moss was still a very good player at that time. So when you look at those types of situations, if New England has these hard, fast rules and you fumble, no matter what the reason was, they might just decide, you know what, you haven't proven enough, forget it, we don't trust you. We don't trust you especially because you look good holding on to the ball and you still couldn't hold on to it. So what do we think then? I'm just trying to play devil's advocate with the situation, in terms of how that goes, because we don't really know the whole answer with it. But I do like the fact that if he's comfortable with the weight and he feels good, he's going to get a chance this year. He's just like Mark Ingram, but with a little bit more of a track record. He's hoping that he can land in a situation where he can start and make amends.
He's like Mark Ingram without that stank. Oh God, no! What'd you do to me? Thanks, Mark Ingram. We're gonna stick with running backs talk in buy or sell, and Matt, I'm gonna flip it right back to you. Knowshon Moreno out of shape. He knows he has to work on conditioning. A story from the Miami Herald on our Football Guys newswire. Dolphins running back Knowshon Moreno indicated that he understands his conditioning is not what he wants it to be at this time, but expects to be ready for the start of camp. And then Moreno says, blah, 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 I'm definitely not there. Whatever. Matt, I throw it back to you. New team, new outlook, same old Moreno. And he's a guy that came in, had the little CrossFit thing, which, it's not slamming CrossFit or whatever, but he came in and lost a bunch of weight. Then he got hurt again. And finally, after being benched for 2 months, he came out and did a few things. But not working on conditioning. I brought up last week, you've got to give the Zippo to the pyromaniac in terms of guy likes to party, and you throw him on South Beach now with the Dolphins. I already have a bad taste in my mouth for Moreno for several different reasons. I see him out of shape, or the report that even he says is he's not where he wants to be condition-wise. And I know it's June, okay? By August, no problem. But you would expect a little more seriousness from a guy that was lucky to get the offer that he got, because nobody was beating down his door in free agency at all for a former first-round pick. I know he's made his money, but I guess I'm disappointed with this news, Matt.
Is there any, just a quick question before I go forward with this, Cecil, is there any news or any hints that he was hurt last season or at the end of the year, that he banged up at all, or anything that he had cleaned up, or any surgeries that we know of?
No, not that we know of, with Knowshon Moreno, which was always something you wondered about, and he did come off the injury that he suffered in the Ravens game. That's why he was slow to build up and last offseason, but he went through all last year, running against 6 or fewer defenders in the box, barely got 1,000 yards. Fantastic receiver, but out of shape with a new team. I just don't like that, Matt.
Yeah, I'm selling him this year at this point, because I think I've talked about this in an upcoming feature that we're all going to be a part of, I believe, with value plays, and I just call it six-man football. He played six-man football last year, and running backs love that when they get an opportunity to do it. But in Miami, he won't be playing six-man football unless Ryan Tannehill just gets into some sort of time machine and we have some sort of bend in the universe in some way that he turns out to be better than Peyton Manning, this year. I don't think that's going to happen. So you also have Lamar Miller, who is, from a talent perspective, way better than Knowshon Moreno. Lamar Miller is a terrific talent. It's just a matter of being able to put things together. So when I look at the fact that Knowshon Moreno went down to Miami, and in Miami they have some really, really great food in Miami, including getting a chance to maybe eat a whole hog on a spit if you go to the right place. And I'm thinking that maybe he ate the whole hog, and and he needs to kind of calm down there a little bit. It is disappointing when you look at a player like this and you see that repeatedly he is unable to stay in shape, stay focused, do the right things off the field. But that's just the nature of some of these guys' personalities, and you can see what happens when guys are focused and playing a contract year, and then when that contract year is up, it's overstated sometimes. You listen to people and say, oh, he's in a contract year, just wait, when he gets that money, he's going to get fat, and that's it, and we hear that refrain over and over again. Certainly it happens, though, and he is an example of how this might be happening. At the same time, if we come to find out that he did have some sort of injury that was kind of kept quiet, then maybe he wasn't able to train and he came in a little bit heavier. That would be the only reason that I would look at and say he's not where he needs to be and it's okay. But at this stage of the game, he should be in shape, ready to roll, and should be competing for that #1 job. But Lamar Miller is showing him up, as he should have been doing anyhow. But the fact that Lamar Miller has been somewhat of an underachiever the first couple of years, it does make this look even worse.
How about you cut alcohol out of your diet? That would help drop a few lbs there, no, Sean? Allegedly, or whatever I have to say. Bloom, I'm tossing this to you.
Yeah.
The foodie,
Right.
Matt got you going there talking about food. Buy or sell this Moreno out-of-shape thing?
Yeah, I think near old Pro Player Stadium, Matt, right? Like there's some places, like some Caribbean places with some really some authentic places where you're walking up to someone's house, basically.
Look,
Yeah.
when I used to play gigs in Little Havana when I was a young college student, and I got the opportunity to have the band that I work with give me a send off, and they roasted a whole hog,
Yeah.
and it was pretty awesome. So yeah, and we used to rehearse right around the old Orange Bowl, so
Yeah.
you'd find some good food around there.
Near the highlight, near the highlight places, right? Get some highlight, get some whole hog. I will say what Matt was talking about. Is there an injury? Is there a reason? I mean, let's face it. The Broncos basically killed Noshawn Moreno against the Patriots. We will probably look back at that game as like, wow, Noshawn Moreno was on his way to maybe having a nice little stretch of years in his career, and then they destroyed him. They just killed him. And he asked them. They asked him, and he did it, and it was good, but he was not the same after that game. And weren't there rumors cease after that game that he had some sort of injury? Maybe he'd miss weeks. Maybe he would miss a week, and then he didn't miss any time at all. And I remember Michael Turner, after his first really big year, after the fact, of course, this stuff only comes out a year or two later, because I remember going back and forth with Greg Kellogg about the cursed 370, and whatever, Michael Turner's a really good running back, but he said that after that season, I think he called it he went into a cave. He didn't really do much in the offseason because he was hurting. And Noshawn Moreno, clearly, he had the most workload he's had since he was at Georgia. And again, he did have that breaking point against New England. He really was used in a way that even Michigan State was saying, hey, you're overusing him. Chill. So I just think that it's fair that he's just coming out of his cave. But that being said, it's still not good. Michael Turner fell off that following year. I think that he was just getting on track in week 8, 9, or 10, and then ended up injured in the second half of the season that year. So it's not a good sign. But just to step back and talk about Miami as a whole, if we're looking for some sort of magical, wonderful thing to rehabilitate him, not like Peyton Manning throwing 50 billion touchdowns, but Bill Lazor, and there's a lot of talk about tempo, and certainly with the personnel that they do have the personnel to do a Chip Kelly kind of multiple look thing. With Mike Wallace, with Hartline, with Jarvis Landry. We'll see if Brandon Gibson's back. We'll see about Rashard Matthews, who there's some negative buzz about. Matt Hazel even. Charles Clay. We'll see. We'll see what they can do with these guys. But if they do really go up tempo, and I do think that Ryan Tannehill is a good quarterback to put in that kind of situation. And certainly if you want to mask an offensive line issues that they're rebuilding. So perhaps there could be more value there. But I know Evan Silva on the couch this week from Roto World, he's still pretty emphatically saying, hey, Lamar Miller after the 10th round, that's just too good to pass up. And I think that with all of this in mind, that's the takeaway here. Whether you want to give Moreno the benefit of the doubt that it's his fault or not his fault, it's not good, which is good for Miller.
Ryan Tannehill with the rocket jetpack, like Boba Fett, wouldn't make that offense high-powered enough for Moreno to play six-man football. Dr. Gene, you hear this about guys that get out of shape and not taking the conditioning as seriously as they could or should. Your thoughts when you hear this news item about Moreno?
First, Bloom, I don't know if you noticed.
Tornado warning.
Yeah, if you're.
I told
I don't
Steve
remember what side of Austin
at any point, and we do have a basement. We're like, people come to our house, work on a house, and they say, a basement? I've been working in Texas for 35 years. I've never seen a basement. So if I just disappear in a poof of smoke, I'm headed for the basement.
Fair enough. Now, I think related to Moreno, I think that if injury wasn't an issue before, being in poor conditioning coming into OTAs, the first real hard work that these guys are doing, not that they're in pads necessarily, but some of the work they're doing is pretty strenuous, is a setup for injury and is a setup for cascade type stuff that could linger. If he pulls a hamstring and it's a mid-grade injury, we're looking at, possibly him missing the first couple of weeks of training camp, 6 to 8 week type situation. So, these are dates that he should have had circled on his calendar, that if he knew he was prone to not being in conditioning when things started, that he needed to get there. So this is definitely a big concern.
They Chris Perry'd him. That's what Bloom,
Yeah.
we talk about the old Michigan running back, got 50 carries in a game. And I'll be careful with the way that I say this. And I've said it on the air before, not on this show, but I've said it on the air. But I'll be careful the way that I say this. There are some around the team that never wanted him to be the starter in Denver at all. He was the starter by default. He was the starter because Ronnie dribbled the ball in the preseason and Monte wasn't ready. And then when he was their starter, they rode him into the ground. So your assessment of that situation, Bloom, as always, spot on. Not going to be the starter by default in Miami when Lamar Miller's just better. Let's continue the conversation and talking about a split and a mix of running backs that are very, very exciting. And kind of I guess maybe a split even here between us on how much we like each back. Now, I think all of us love Gio Bernard. Okay, no question there. What Gio Bernard can do with the ball in the hands in the open space. You love that electricity, the home run threat, if you will. There's my baseball reference. Bloom, I'll mix a World Cup reference in, and not a joke, sometime in the near future. But the point is this, a news item that comes out saying that Gio Bernard and Jeremy Hill, who I've tagged as one of the few, very, very small number of running backs this year that's actually got star potential. There's a report coming out, this is actually from Bengals.com, that they're playing with the idea of using Bernard and Hill on the field at the same time. Both running backs have good hands out of the backfield and will present defenses with problems. And an underrated facet of Hill's game is that receiving ability, and he's swifter. He's got some deceptive speed to him. Again, not going to run away from guys, but for a big guy, you think Rumble Bumble, and he's got a little scoot to his game. Dr. Gene, I'll start with you there around Cincinnati parts, kind of the buzz that's going on. Buy or sell Gio and Hill being used on the field together at the same time. We know there's already going to be a split, and that's something fantasy owners are going to have to navigate. What about both of them out there at the same time, presenting more weapons for Andy Dalton as a passer? Your thoughts, Gene?
Yeah, I have the same opinion on this as I did with the Spiller Jackson take last week, which is this is the time of year where we see offensive coordinators try what they have in their playbook to see if it'll work or not. Whether or not it translates to the regular season is anybody's guess. Again, like Spiller and Jackson, I think Bernard and Hill are the type of backs that could coexist in the same backfield and do well. It's a good way to confuse defenses. It's a good way to take some of the pressure off Andy Dalton. There's lots of weapons around him at the wide receiver and tight end position as well. But this is a good chance to see what these guys can do. I think Jeremy Hill, more of what we're hearing around here than anything else is that they would like Jeremy Hill to step up and take over the Ben Jarvis Green Ellis role. We really didn't see those two players, Green Ellis and Bernard, on the field at the same time last year. It's a new offensive coordinator in Hugh Jackson, but a new offensive coordinator that likes to pound the ball a little bit. And I don't know that we want that we want to see Gio Bernard on the field with Jeremy Hill in that situation, whether it's an extra tight end, a jumbo offensive line set where they put a third offensive tackle out there. If they're going to pound the ball. They don't necessarily need why have Bernard there as a decoy necessarily when you can put somebody else there to grade the road for Hill. So let's see how this works out come training camp. We're probably going to see some of those looks as the Bengals try to do some stuff in camp. If it carries over into the first couple of weeks of the season, it could be a good thing. But I'm still skeptical about these situations when we hear thunder and lightning type. It's just rare that stuff carries over game into game into game into the regular season.
Well, Bloom, I'm going to toss this to you next because in PPR leagues, 12 teams specifically, Gio Bernard is running back 11, coming off the board at 206. You've got Jeremy Hill at running back 43, coming off at 1002. Navigating this, hearing both on the field at the same time, buying or selling this Bengals running back situation.
Yeah, Bernard's tough. I mean, we had the shine of a new stud running back last year, and there was that run against Miami on the Thursday night. I was like, oh, it's the best run I've ever seen in my 45 years of watching football. I've never seen a run like that. No, but I mean, I shouldn't go off on that tangent. The point is that we thought, hey, here we go. We have the next guy, and they take a power back. But I still think that in these situations, when I reflect on them, usually we overcompensate. I think that, unfortunately, the ADP of Bernard means that people aren't really compensating at all. I mean, I'm not going to take Bernard in the second round. He's not going to get that role. And no, folks, he's not. And I like Giovanni Bernard. I was advocating strongly to take him as the first overall pick in rookie drafts last year. But he's not Jamal Charles. He's not LaShawn McCoy. He's not going to be that kind of back. He's not C.J. Spiller. He's not going to be the kind of back that on 225 carries and 40 or 50 receptions can approach top 5, top 7 numbers. And honestly, that's why he would have appeal in the mid-second. I don't think so. Hill later on does make more sense, especially in non-PPR leagues. If he's going to probably get the first calls at the goal line. As you said, he's a good receiver. He's not just a Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis type. Although I don't think Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis. The ideal scenario here is that Green Ellis gets cut, but there's been talk that they want to keep Green Ellis around as a mentor type for Hill, which makes sense. Especially, that Hill's by far not the cleanest character guy coming in and things like that. So I don't think that Green Ellis is just going, and that's just Green Ellis in a nutshell, his career, right? Like, he's just not going to go away. So I'm probably looking elsewhere in the 9th, 10th, 11th round for that a running back, a rookie, or a young back. Lamar Miller, we just talked about. I would take Lamar Miller before Jeremy Hill. And Matt's going to light up, and I'm not going to say Cedric Pierman, Matt, but I am going to say Rex Burkhead here. And I think that Rex Burkhead can be just as good as Jeremy Hill. I really do. And I don't think that the Bengals are writing off Burkhead. And I wouldn't be surprised in the preseason if we watch the Bengals and we watch Hill and Burkhead right after each other and say, Burkhead is not a lesser player than Jeremy Hill.
I will refrain at this point, Bloom, because I'll disagree with that, but we'll save that for later. Matt, I want to throw it to you. Gio, Hill together on the field at the same time, and the Bengals thing.
Yeah. This is how I would look at it. I disagree with Bloom about how Giovanni Bernard can never be a top 5 back, because I actually believe I have a name that you did not mention. Okay. His name is Brian Westbrook. Brian Westbrook was a top 5 back. Here's the problem, though. I do agree with Bloom that in the Cincinnati Bengals offense organization, they do not have a coach that is imaginative enough to use Brian Westbrook or to use Giovanni Bernard like Brian Westbrook. So, yes, technically there is no shot that Giovanni Bernard is going to be a top 5 back in this league as long as he is with the Bengals with their current regime. That said, whereas Cecil doesn't agree with the Burkhead Hill comparison, I would probably say that this would be a fun one for us to kind of hash out at some point. But I don't really trust the Bengals with their running back situation in the first place. To me, the only guy that is worth a darn because of the fact that they're going to make it a priority to use him is Bernard. Does that mean that I want to use him pick him that early where he is with his ADP? No. I mean, right now, I think he does need to come in a little bit lower. Yes, they may use the backs at the same time, but like Bramel said, it's very rare that they're able to use them in a way where fantasy owners are going to benefit from both. I mean, this isn't Kevin Mack and Ernest Biner. This is a situation where we're probably going to see we're probably going to see Hill as a bye week option at best, and you're rolling the dice whether it's going to work out if Bernard stays healthy. And that's really the only way this works for me, is that Hill is a guy that I may use as a late round handcuff if I'm going to be selective of how I use handcuffs at the end of the draft. And so, I may buy it schematically, but I'm not buying it as a fantasy owner.
Buy or sell continues as we actually switch away from running backs for the first time in about an hour, and we get on to something else, a topic that in buy or sell, I guess from a recent Twitter conversation that I saw come across my @replies, people thinking of old wide receivers and what do they have left in the tank. And I guess there are people that are cool on Wes Welker. The ADP does not reflect that. Wide receiver 14. Bloom, you had pointed this out with the Stokely comparisons for one Wes Welker there. People certainly underselling. Emmanuel Sanders' ADP fell in the last week. He's now wide receiver 27. So where they're overvaluing Wes, they're undervaluing Emmanuel in this offense. Of course, DT still at wide receiver 2. But my specific topic was about one Reggie Wayne. And Dr. Gene, I'm going to throw this one at you first because Reggie Wayne, we know what he was. We know what he can still be if he's even remotely that guy. Because as players get up there, and I remember when it fell apart for Marvin Harrison, it was quick. And different types of wide receivers, certainly. But an older player, when they get that injury at that advanced age, if they lose just a little bit, yes, they may be a sharp route runner. I remember watching Jerry Rice when he was in Denver, and he could still break off crisp routes, but he had nothing coming out of the break. So even guys that were slappies, that weren't hanging on to the roster, they could cover Jerry Rice because he had lost too much. With Reggie Wayne, is there a concern, Dr. Gene, that he might have lost too much? Emerging T.Y. Hilton, you got Hakeem Nicks as a one-year fix type thing in situation there. How much does Reggie Wayne have left in the tank, buying or selling his current average draft position, Dr. Gene, of wide receiver 32, 707, and 12-team PPR?
I think that wide receiver, it's a hedge, right? Because, if we see that he's doesn't seem to have much left in the tank in training camp in those first couple of preseason games, nobody's going to want him as a wide receiver 3 with T.Y. Hilton there and possibly Dwayne Allen coming back and a few other options for Andrew Luck. But if he does look like he's there, then, I think he was probably a top 20, maybe even a top 15 wide receiver last year. And so then he's a very good value pick in that 30 range. So I think that's a hedge between, do you trust him as a wide receiver 2 without knowing that he's fully recovered from the injury and able to get back with Andrew Luck in the way he was in the past? And we don't know the answer to that yet. So as soon as we know the answer to that question, I imagine he'll move up pretty quickly. What's the likelihood that he's not going to be able to come back well? We've seen older players, younger players, and older players, an ACL injury, especially given enough time, if you're outside that 9-month time frame after the injury, and Wayne will be pretty close to that by the time the season starts. Most of these guys are recovering pretty well. I didn't see anything last year before the injury that made me think he was starting to lose a quarter of a step, and another quarter of a step, making a half step after this ACL would put him in that Jerry Rice category that you talked about. So I think there's reason to be optimistic about him. I would be buying him at that late wide receiver 3 ADP in the hopes that he'd recover and you'd have something there.
Bloom, I'll toss this one to you. Reggie Wayne and that ADP. Are you buying or selling? What's the old man got left?
I'm not buying any indie wide receivers. I think the ADP reflects this, where Hilton's in the 5th and Wayne's in the 7th and Nicks is going a little bit later in the 9th. I don't know how this split's going to work out. I don't know if Wayne's going to come back enough to establish 89% of his previous production levels that would justify that. I don't know if Nicks is really used up from all the leg injuries or he's going to have a resurgence on this prove-it deal. And I don't know if Hilton can be a consistent week-to-week performer when he has other quality receivers around him. And also I love that guy Dwayne Allen, who I'll give Matt the credit for being way out ahead of that with Dwayne Allen. So I still think that Andrew Luck, and I'm not taking Andrew Luck, but I think this is all going to intersect at Luck, and I'm not going to take I'm not going to take Reggie Wayne. I'm not going to take any of these indie receivers because I don't have clarity. And I think week to week we may not have clarity. And also the monkey wrench here is that Pep Hamilton may not unleash luck. They may go back to, well, we're gonna make this work. We're gonna make this balanced running attack work, and then we'll go.
And they gave up that for Trent Richardson and Pep Hamilton. And listen, I'm not going to take anything away from Andrew Luck. Certainly he could be one of the best in the game. He's got to throw more than 23 damn touchdowns. He's got back-to-back years with 23 touchdowns. Got to do more than that. From the fantasy lens specifically. Matt, your turn. Reggie Wayne and buy or sell.
Well, he sure as heck didn't have Marshall Faulk to throw 29 touchdowns to as a rookie and nothing else with a bad offensive line. Just dink and dump and do what he did with a great running back in his first year. Andrew Luck didn't have a great running back. And then that next year he didn't have Marvin Harrison either. I mean, yeah, certainly Reggie Wayne getting hurt down the line there. So I look at this, and at the value that he's at, I'd take a chance on Reggie Wayne. Heck, I picked up Reggie Wayne off waivers in an IDP Dynasty League, in our Football Guys League, when somebody cut him and just stashed him on my injured reserve, I think, or just stashed him on my roster and just decided to wait because let's find out. I mean, I think all the things at a certain point when you look at ADP, once it's late enough, why not? You take the chance. If he doesn't work out, you cut him. It's okay. You know, if it's a later round pick or a mid to late round pick where the guy has upside to be a top 15 player, to me, that's worth the investment. I understand all the questions about Hakeem Nicks, and what's going to happen one way or the other. But listen, Hakeem Nicks to me is basically a more athletic version of Reggie Wayne when he's paired with a quarterback with consistent amount of sense and he's healthy. And so to me, either of those guys are good options to go after. You just have to understand that you don't want to invest too heavily in too many of those guys on your roster. If you invest in one or two, if you pick Reggie Wayne, you don't want to go after 3 or 4 more guys like Reggie Wayne who are trying to come back. Roddy White, for example. You probably want to just pick one and say, all right, that's my quota of guys who I'm not sure are going to be able to come back and do this. Now it's time to pick more high upside guys that I don't have to wait around as much for, and I can cut sooner. Or here's a handcuff that's going to work for me in this situation. So I like them. I'd probably invest in them if my roster makeup is just right. But again, if I've invested in Roddy White first, or Hakeem Nicks before that, or however it all plays out, then at that point, yeah, maybe Reggie Wayne would be sitting by the wayside and wait for somebody else to pick him up.
From a veteran wide receiver to a rookie wide receiver, and we go from Indianapolis to Philadelphia, a news item that comes through. A couple of news items, actually, that tie in. And, Bloom, I'm going to throw this one to you first. And it is with Jordan Matthews. Now, Sure. Jordan Matthews at Vandy, of course, Senior Bowl, route runner. Think of Eric Decker. He's going to run a crisp route, not really get that much separation. Can pull in some passes that are contested. I've called him clutch because there were plenty of times of Vandy when they needed that 3rd and 7 or whatever it was, and it was always Matthews. That's what it seemed like in watching Matthews during his college career. He's been very impressive, albeit with the second team. You had the injury scare with Jeremy Macklin, Bloom, clutching the left knee, got up, and they said he was fine, but still not what you want to hear when he's coming back from the right knee ACL injury. And I tossed you first, Bloom, because for clarification purposes, you wrote an article earlier that said Jordan Matthews overrated, but overrated based on what some people were hyping him up as.
And still.
And Philadelphia's offense. And perhaps something happens with Macklin, and he wiggles his way in. Your thoughts here with him impressing? Again, it is OTAs, but he is impressing. Bloom, you've got the podium.
Yeah, well, this is what he's supposed to do. I mean, he's the hardest worker and so dedicated and burying his head in the playbook. He's supposed to shine in practice. Also, he's playing with Matt Barkley. I think it was or Sanchez, one of those guys. They're just blending into one guy in my head. What's that? Yeah,
G.J. Kinney.
G.J. Kinney, who may beat out Barkley. Who knows? But he is playing with the second team, and Jimmy Kempski, who said he's the best receiver on the practice field by far, the very next tweet said, "Well, let's be put context here, Macklin and Cooper aren't going to be going that hard in June. So, of course, Matthews, as a rookie proving himself, should look a lot better. And it was funny because he looks like the best receiver on the field was retweeted. I'm guilty of this kind of stuff sometimes. I want to act like I'm above this. I try to be above it, but not always. The one that he looks like the best wide receiver on the field was retweeted like 130 times. And the next tweet, which was, now let's give this some context, Cooper and Macklin are probably not balling out in June 4 times. So, But hey, Matthews, I think it's a good fit because execution is more important than making splash plays or individual plays in the Chip Kelly offense. He can execute. I think it was our Kyle Wachtel, though, that said, you could look at the Eagles this year as a team that may have 5 guys with more than 40 receptions, but none of them with more than 60. That should look familiar to anybody who's followed Oregon football and looked at the stats at the end of the year of an Oregon Ducks football team. So, maybe in year 2, year 3, as Macklin moves on, Matthews, as Sproles gets towards the end of his career, Matthews becomes that guy. But the other thing you have to bring up, and I want to say that Jason Wood, our Eagles man, of course, season ticket holder, brought up, is, Sproles and Ertz, and a lot of people are forecasting a breakout for Ertz. They play kind of the same role in that, you're going to line them up relatively similar places in the formation. So, yeah, Matthews as a Colston slot receiver makes a lot of sense for his skills, makes a lot of sense for how he can make the biggest splash. But unlike Colston, he's not going to be I don't think, on the field every play or a first read most of the time. He's not going to be, you're not looking at a Drew Brees pass offense here. So for fantasy, we may say Matthews had a terrific rookie year, but still never made a difference for fantasy.
And that's something that we all have to note. And looking at the Chip Kelly offense, I'm glad that you brought up that simplicity, Bloom. As I toss this one to you, Dr. Jene, because a lot of the reads are going to be predetermined pre-snap. You know where to go with the football, so it's going to be Sproles, Ertz, Cooper, Macklin if he's healthy. We had the scare. We talked about Ben Tate's scare. Your thoughts here with the rookie impressing an Eagles camp, Dr. Jene?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have anything to add to what Bloom just said. I think both Sig and Matt have paid a lot of attention to Jordan Matthews and done a lot of good analysis on him. I'm going to defer to what they've seen and what they think, and I think Bloom's take on this, especially the cautionary tale that he notes with Twitter to not respond to, a lot of these guys are going to see tweet after tweet after tweet, and just because the first tweet is the one that garnered as much attention doesn't mean that the ones after that are important, and I think in this case, it's good to remember that, as well as bringing up the issues about, how many receptions these guys are going to have. I really don't have too much to add to what Bloom said.
Matt, Jordan Matthews was down to the Senior Bowl, where we were earlier this year. Your thoughts here, hearing him impressing, and knowing in this system, with those predetermined reads, it's not like Nick Foles has a bunch of decisions to go through. It's not like he has a bunch of progressions to go through. He pretty much knows where he's going with the football based on what the defense is doing. Chip Kelly shows his hand because he knows you're going to play it a certain way, and then the quarterback knows, okay, I go with the ball here.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to find out really how defenses adjust to that, because to me that's going to be the bigger question is, how's Nick Foles going to respond this year? Is he going to have the incredible season that he had, last year? I doubt that, but how much is he going to, I don't want to say regress because I can't stand that whole regression to the mean thing, but how far is he going to have an adjustment when it comes to defenses and how they play him? Because is he still going to be good, or is he going to be a Derek Anderson type of bust? I think he'll still probably be pretty good. And the thing is who is he going to target? Jeremy Macklin. I've never been a huge fan of Jeremy Macklin. To me, he's the version. This is probably my weakness as a fantasy owner. There are certain players that I look at, like Jeremy Macklin, like Kelvin Benjamin, who I look at and say they're limited in what they can do. They have some sort of limited skill. They don't show the well-rounded concept that you'd like to see. Maybe they're not particularly smart players in every facet of the game for their position. But when you put them in the right position, you put them in the right situation, and you feed them the ball, they're going to do well. And sometimes the snob in me as a football guy who watches a lot of game film and ends up seeing guys that I see who handle this wide spectrum of skills, sometimes it's easy for me to look at a guy like Macklin and kind of discount him a little bit. And that goes for Matthews as well. You know, I look at Matthews and I see some of his limitations, and I wonder if that's going to work out for him. But when I looked at where he went in Philadelphia, I do see the Marcus Colston potential. I don't see it this year. I don't think that, but then again, if we're going to put Chip Kelly up on the same pedestal that we put up Sean Payton, then who's to say that they're not going to make the adjustment right away? I mean, Sean Payton did it with Marcus Colston early on, and Marcus Colston was a fantasy factor from the get-go as an undrafted free agent. So why wouldn't we afford Chip Kelly, the new incoming genius of the NFL, the same opportunity to make these adjustments and do well? I mean, and when you look at this, certainly Zach Ertz is also often put on the outside. If you put Zach Ertz on the outside, you put Darren Sproles, roll him out, motion him out, and then you're going to have Jordan Matthews up the seam playing that role. He's going to be the mismatch advantage, and he's going to get a lot of opportunities to catch footballs. The thing is, what I fear is that teams are going to adjust to Jordan Matthews. And so the way I see it is, I'm not buying Jordan Matthews this year. In Dynasty, I would buy him, and I would buy him a lot higher than where I ranked him in my pre-draft publication. But I think that he's a guy that eventually they're going to find ways to get him open and let him do work. I don't think he's ever going to be a number one fantasy receiver on a consistent basis, but I think he can be a really solid wide receiver too in the top 15 to 20. And he's going to be a guy this year, though, that you're going to look at, and he's going to have some really strong games. People are going to go nuts. Twitter's going to blow up, and there's going to be, and Chip Kelly's going to be able to run for president or at least mayor of Philadelphia, until they adjust, and Marcus Colston Jr. ends up having some Ofer games or some, 7 targets, 2 receptions for 13-yard weeks, and people are disappointed, and they talk about how much he stinks now when neither the high nor the low was actually accurate.
And there we go. The Chip Kelly offense. I love the simplicity. I love the effectiveness, and I love all the pieces that they have in place in Philadelphia. So, again, always going to be exciting, and we'll see how Nick Foles does in this year, entering in as the man, unlike last year. Speaking of the man, young baby Hawk, we've got a lot of new listeners, Bloom, so I believe it's worth retelling.
Sure.
And in a moment that we'll never experience again. I mean, this was the first time when a player came up to me and Sigmund at the Texas vs. the Nation game. It was 2009, Bloom? Is that correct? 2009. And it was a guy named Andrew Hawkins. Now, he wasn't participating in the Texas vs. the Nation game down there in El Paso. He was in the CFL after coming out undrafted, and he wanted to just be around the NFL scouts and be around the game. So he came essentially to, help out in drills and, throw some passes to some wide receivers during drills, just kind of to be around the game. And he came up to Bloom and I and said, "Hey, Cecil and Sigmund Bloom, I love Draft Guys TV. I love what you guys do." And we're like, "Wow, thanks." And he's always been very gracious with his time. Of course, had the Michael Irvin reality show, 4th and Long, where he was second to Jesse Hawley in that. He should have won it. But you see the work that this guy put in, and the fact that he's a good friend of the show. I was at the store the other day, and it was texting with him. So, I mean, the guy's just fantastic guy, and now getting an opportunity in Cleveland, now standing out in Cleveland, news item that comes in via Nate Ulrich, out there saying Andrew Hawkins stood out. Mike Pettin has talked about him. He singled out Hawkins' short area quickness as something that he's liked. You've heard other reports from OTAs. Andrew Hawkins is the best wide receiver here. So I guess we cut through that again, Bloom. And your thoughts with Andrew Hawkins? We know they need wide receiver help. And listen, Miles Austin, whatever. No one ever roots for injury, and that's not what I'm doing. But do you really think Miles Austin is going to be healthy? I don't. Nate Burleson, whatever. Andrew Hawkins could do a lot more than what people think. Bloom, your thoughts on young baby Hawk here as that second guy behind, of course, tight end Jordan Cameron?
Yeah, and I'll just flesh out that story a little bit because what's amusing about it to me is, we got the show with On Networks doing 5-minute drill, fantasy football. We were, at that point, maybe not old hat, but certainly that was our specialty. But we pitched them Draft Guys TV. We're going to go on the road to these All-Star games, which we were going to do anyway. And, we'll break down the film. We'll tell you what we like about these guys. But still, at that point, the whole Draftnik online draft world was in its infancy. And, I don't want to say fake it till you make it, but I wasn't sure whether I was faking it or not. I was just saying what I thought. And when Andrew Hawkins came up to us at that game and was like, Cecil Sigmund, yeah, I know you guys from Draft Guys TV. I love Draft Guys TV. I remember saying, wow, because he was playing for the Montreal Alouettes at the time. And I just remember saying, that was one of the first times I felt like, wow, someone who actually plays football professionally thinks our show's all right. Okay, this is cool. Because I would have been very gracious and accepting if they're like, it's a good show, but you guys sometimes say some things that aren't really, and I'm sure that we still did. So it's great, but no. And I remember another thing that really stood out to me from that time, spending that time hanging out with him, because obviously we hit it off after that because we just geek out about football. Was that he of course learned from Lance Moore, who he shares those Toledo Rockets bloodlines with him. And he talked about how Lance Moore, even when he was cut and not on a team, was getting up at 4 a.m. and doing his, crazy regimen every day. And I think that's what they're seeing from Hawkins in Cleveland. And it is not crazy. See, so I'm reminded of whenever we had Mike Reese on before the 2007 season. He said, hey, Wes Welker could lead New England in receptions. Where, this might sound a bit outlandish. I think Hawkins can catch 900 balls. I wouldn't be shocked if he catches 6, 7, 8 balls a game, every game, because he's going to get open, he's going to move the chains, and he's going to be probably the only constant outside of Jordan Cameron in this pass offense. They're talking about lining him up outside, not just in the slot. And it sounds to me, and this is based on what we know about him personally too, that he's gotten the opportunity and he's on a mission to show Cleveland what they got and show Cincinnati what they let slip through their fingers. And everything is intersecting at him being a PPR machine. So, if you're drafting early PPR leagues, especially best ball leagues, because that's the thing is I could see him having like 13 catch games. Just certain games where it's working with him or Hoyer, Manziel, whoever, that it's just there. Like you just keep stabbing away at it. Bam, 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 bam. If you have him matched up against a corner who doesn't have good feet, it's going to be there 5, 6, 7, 8 yards just stealing from the cookie jar. I think it's going to work. I think it's going to line up. And I'm trying to circle back and get him in some of my dynasty leagues.
Wide receiver 71. 1404 in 12-team PPR right now, people. This is incredible value out of Andrew Hawkins. Dr. Jene, back to you, and back to what I said earlier in the show when we talked about the Browns. Nobody threw the ball more than them. Nobody. Think about that. Peyton Manning threw 55 touchdowns, 5,500 yards, 5,477. Who's counting? Nobody threw the ball more than Cleveland last year. Andrew Hawkins, in your face, Dr. Jene.
Yeah, Hawkins is going to get open. I'm a little bit skeptical of how successful he can be outside. I think he can be, but I don't think that he's a prototypical X or Z receiver in any way. And I wonder, I do think he's going to be able to get open over the middle, but I think there's some redundancy in what Jordan Cameron and Andrew Hawkins are going to be able to do. But I totally agree. It's lots of value here at this point when you're looking at him as a low wide receiver 6. There's no difference in his PPR or his non-PPR ADP at this point. I think it looks like we've all got, all our football guys projectors have him around the 45-50 range. I think that's a very reasonable floor for him. I don't know that I'd put him in a Wes Welker category right now where you expect him to get 90 to 110 catches, but certainly the ceiling is much, much higher than that 45 to 50 catches, and no problem at all if you're looking at him as a wide receiver 5, much earlier than what this ADP would suggest.
I talked to Welker last week, actually gave me a good answer. Usually he's pretty stoic with his answers, about why are these undrafted slot receivers, and go down the list. Danny Amendola, I asked him about Burst specifically. So for the people out there like, well, Andrew Hawkins, what's he done, blah, blah, blah. The Chargers cut Wes Welker. Okay. Was it Tim Dwight was there? But a guy like Tim reached out to Wes, taught him a few things, and obviously we know what Welker has become. Matt, you look at this average draft position, you look at how things are kind of shaping up. Somebody's got to catch a damn rock, and outside of Jordan Cameron, it's young baby Hawk. Matt, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing that we do have to understand is that the Browns pass more than anybody in this league because defenses were like, look who they have throwing the ball and look who they have running the ball. And, there was nobody that could really run the football in Cleveland who was healthy. And, it was kind of one of those situations that the team was forced to have to go to the pass early and often. So when I look at this, this year, Ben Tate, if he's healthy enough. If not, you have Crowell, you have Terrence West, you have Mr. Lewis, who was quite a nice player at Pittsburgh, who had a nice preseason before he broke his leg. What's his first name? The former Dion. There we go. Dion Lewis. That's right. So Dion Lewis, he's rehabbing. He could be they're loaded at running back in terms of talent. And I know that there was a report by Mary Kay Cabot where she quoted on Twitter saying, Ben Tate says that nobody on the Cleveland roster scares him. Well, for those of you who are maybe new to beat writerese, that really stands for, Ben Tate saying, I'm confident about my ability. That's not saying that the Cleveland Browns depth chart is bad, Ben Tate's been saying things like, I'm the best running back in this class when he was at Auburn, and he wasn't the best running back in this class. He was a good back, but he was hyper confident. He compared himself to Adrian Peterson. He was that type of player. He always has been, and it's just the same old thing. You could ask him if he was going to take up boxing, if he could beat Muhammad Ali in his prime with one hand, and Ben Tate would probably say, I could beat him with one pinky. You could break my hand and break my leg, and I could still knock him out in the second round. That's Ben Tate's attitude. So looking at this right now, I think that Andrew Hawkins can be a 65 to 75 catch receiver, probably a more dynamic version of Devon Best, but I still have questions about him as a complete player, because let's face it, I like his route running. You can go to YouTube and find something. I'm probably going to post actually on my blog, but you can find 5 to 7 minute clip of Hawkins running routes in practice, and they're a thing of beauty. He's doing all these wonderful moves on moves to get free from press, to set up defenders. He's telling stories better than Oscar Wilde probably did in plays, But it's the type of thing that when you look at this, you have to understand that small receivers, when they have to get open and they have to do it by making moves on moves on moves, quarterbacks don't have time for all that dancing around all the time. Sometimes it's really good, and it works out to set up in a way like that, and you can set up defenders. But if you can't win off one move, off one cut, off of a more simplistic route type, then you're going to be in trouble. And that's where my concern might be with Andrew Hawkins. Can he do that? When he's outside, is he going to, is this going to be dance fever, or is he going to be a guy that's going to be able to make, one move and get open, or is he going to have to do a whole lot of stuff to get open? And Brian Hoyer's like, I'm going to the other guy because I don't have time for this. I've got somebody in my face. I can't wait for that third move that you're going to put on the guy before you make the break. And again, I love what he can do. I think that he can be good, but the difference between being maybe a 65 and 75 reception guy and a 90 to 115 reception guy is how well he adjusts to his quarterback and how good of routes he can run outside of the ones that look really, really pretty in practice.
I want to get to the Twitter questions in just a little bit, but I want to talk about Johnny Manziel because it piggybacks off what we said about Andrew Hawkins here. Andrew Hawkins keeping plays alive and Manziel keeping plays alive. Let's talk about when Manziel's the quarterback. If you have a quick, shifty, and elusive, agile wide receiver, when the play breaks down, you're taught to go vertical or come back to the football. These are things that Hawkins could both do well. So, and also on those shorter routes, Manziel will need a security blanket to lean on. That could, in fact, be one Andrew Hawkins, young baby Hawk. I want to throw this one out there. It's not really a buy or sell. but it was a question that was asked to me last weekend, and a caller called in because I was going off on the faux overreaction on social networking about Johnny Manziel's in Vegas. Why isn't his nose in the playbook? Why is he in Vegas? What's he doing having a good time? Why is he partying? Where's the beer? Why is he floating on some goose in a pool in Austin or whatever that was, if that was even him? But all this ridiculousness that comes out and overreaction about Johnny Manziel doing anything that isn't just studying football. Why isn't he not? Why is he doing this? Why is he with Gronk? And for me, as I said on Riding Shotgun, I don't care. I don't care. If he can show up and get on the field and look good and do what he's supposed to do when he's there, when he's in meetings, if he's not falling asleep, if he's not showing up hungover or drunk, and there have been quarterbacks who may or may not have played in Denver and may or may not have initials that are JC that had problems with alcohol and got kicked out of several bars in Denver. I'm just saying, hypothetical, if there was a guy like that, if as long as shut your mouth like that isn't happening, I don't give a damn. I don't give a rat's ass. Party in Vegas, whatever. He's a kid. He's having fun. It's not a big deal. So a caller called in, and he said, well, I agree with you. What's he got to do to shut these people up? Essentially nothing. I don't think there's anything that Johnny Manziel, if he comes out and he wins 8 games, or he comes out and he takes the Browns to the playoffs, and I think that would be something, no one's going to say Super Bowl win or whatever, but if Johnny Manziel comes in or begins the season as the starter, maybe he Russell Wilson's it, and he leads the Browns to the playoffs. Even then, when they lose eventually in the playoffs, somebody somewhere, probably on Twitter, is going to be like, well, if it wasn't partying in Vegas in June, they would have won that playoff game. It's laughable. And actually, Bloom, as I throw it to you first, it's really kind of sad that Manziel has to deal with this bullshit. Shut your mouth. The answer essentially is nothing. He can't do anything to shut these people up. But it's terrible to me that he's going to be held to this standard in this microscope when plenty of quarterbacks have liked to party a little bit, and maybe some during the regular season. Maybe some were actually drunk or hungover in the Pro Bowl. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Just maybe.
Yeah, Bloom, your thoughts.
Yeah, good stuff. First of all, I would not feel sorry for Johnny Manziel at all. Okay, just do a little Googling on like some of the girls that he goes home from parties with. I'm not feeling sorry. I don't feel sorry for him. I will not ever feel sorry for Johnny Manziel. Okay.
He's sleeping on the couch tonight.
Yeah. That being said, I sleep on the couch every night. That being said, I think that you're right, Cease, that there's a certain school of thought on him that, and this is what I would say, who I feel sorry for are the people that are pointing at things like this and saying, see, he just doesn't take football seriously enough and things like that. Why can't he be more like Tim Tebow? Because he was far from the only NFL player in Las Vegas that weekend. He's far from the only NFL player that you could take a picture of drunk hanging on to some swan with one arm or something like that, if that was him, as you said, Cease. He's just being singled out because it fits a narrative. And I think that you're very right to point out that if you're concerned about quarterbacks who may have been playing or not, hitting the bottle too hard and things like that, you would probably be shocked to learn the actual backstories of some of quarterbacks that we would consider very good quarterbacks.
And quarterbacks with squeaky clean images. Gene, I'm throwing this one to you next. What does Johnny Manziel have to do to shut these people up?
No, it's this, Gene. It's this.
It is too damn hard to follow Bloom tonight. I'm telling you, man. Bloom's got it going on.
He's just thinking about Google right now. He's just doing the Google searches. Don't show your tabs in the screen share.
I don't think I have anything Googled, but this is there's nothing he can do. This is quarterbacks with personality face this issue from the media, and even more so now with the 24-hour news cycle of ESPN, NFL Network, Twitter, and what have you, where anybody can post an Instagram picture of anything, unless you insulate yourself in your own living room, and maybe not even then, This stuff is going to happen to these guys with personalities, and that's part of what you want, I think, anyway, in your quarterback. You want a quarterback with a little bit of a personality, a quarterback who's a little bit of a risk taker, has some impulsiveness to him, has some of the qualities that make Johnny Manziel a lightning rod in the media. So what can he do? What can Tony Romo do? What was Brett Favre able to do? At certain points, what was Peyton Manning, who may not be that same type of personality? But what does a quarterback, a high-profile, hopefully successful quarterback who is being counted on to carry their team someplace in the long term? There's nothing these guys can do. They're going to be under the spotlight. This sort of stuff is going to happen.
This sort of stuff is out there, Matt. I mean, imagine if Twitter existed when Broadway Joe was running around in a fur coat and flip-flops, going to clubs and all that kind of good stuff.
You have read my mind.
We can only imagine, my friend. Thoughts here on this Manziel? I've got plenty of questions with Manziel on the field. Okay, I've documented those on this show several times. The off-field stuff, I don't care. If he's showing up and doing what he's supposed to do, I don't care.
Here's the deal. You've read my mind about Namath because that's exactly who I'm going to mention here. He can't win this battle because this battle is against people who want to see clicks and want to see views on their media reports at the big networks, at the websites, from the big ones to the small ones. Because really, and these websites, even though it's geared towards a young demographic, they're all folks who are as old as my dad or older who are running the show and making these decisions, even if they're not the main editorial manager in the media room or in these content meetings. They might be the guy who's the boss of that boss, who, while they have a meeting once a week during lunch, or says, that Johnny Manziel kind of reminds me of Joe Namath. We should really play up that Namath angle a lot more. And that media guy who's our age, maybe even younger, probably is cringing, but it's like, I like my job. I'm going to keep my job. I hate my boss, but I'm still going to do this. So let's go ahead and find ways that we can draw the comparison between Johnny Manziel and make up the Joe Namath storyline and continue to propagate this and use it so that we can get cheap views and clicks and be salacious about it all, and to be able to generate, because sex sells, because going out and celebrity sells, and all those types of things. And that's the way it works. And it also just inflames people who go to work every day, have to dress up in a suit, have to look good because their partner, have to live in the right house, even though they have to spend twice as much money in the neighborhood that they really don't want to be in, because they could save a lot more money living somewhere else, but they're supposed to live there, or wear the right suit or drive the right car. Those are the types of things, so that when they see somebody like Manziel make all this money and he goes out and parties and his image isn't anything remotely the image that they have to stand up to, they don't like that either. So, there's a group of people that I think are probably like that. Not a lot of them. I think most of them are like, dude, I wish I could do what he's doing right now. I wish I could go out and have fun and kind of do some of these things. But I think more than anything it's just the media. He can't do anything about it other than just play well. That's all he's going to be able to do, and to overcome it. And when he fails, they're going to talk about it. They're going to talk about the way they talked about with Romo and whoever he was dating. Did that person he was dating influence his, Jessica Simpson? Was that who he was dating? And they were and saying that she was influencing his play and that he wasn't any good because of her, and all these types of things like that. I mean, come on. Seriously, I wish that just for a day we could find somebody. We need somebody on the Onion to, do something with like a president, CEO of Bank of America or something, and have it, and scrutinize why they had a loss of $50 million over the past several years. Or was it 50? No, I think it was $50 billion. No, 50 million. They lost over $50 billion over the years during the recession, And maybe we could attribute his decisions to, what he was doing on, Saturday night and Sunday night, and why they lost $50 million. We could talk a little bit more about that, as opposed to, a football player who's in his mid-20s who wants to go out and have a little bit of fun.
Hey, you think people would have a problem with pulling back the veil on football players? Pull back the veil on corporations?
How about football owners? How about Irsay? We're not even talking about Irsay. We're not even talking about all these owners and the issues.
Neither is Roger Goodell.
Well,
exactly.
Let's pull open that rock and see all the worms there that are. Yeah, exactly. We can't do that. No.
Right.
Yeah,
and Roger Goodell quick to the trigger like John Wayne with all these players. You get a parking ticket, and Roger Goodell's it's on his desk. You're thinking about a suspension, and Jim Irsay can be Jim Irsay, and everyone knows, by the way, the problems that he has, and they just what? We're just let's get him some help. Anyway, let's go ahead and wrap up.
Answer right there.
Yeah. There
That's
you go.
That's what it's all about.
What is it that Chris Rock? There's rich and then there's wealthy. Yeah, there's rich and then there's wealthy. Twitter questions quickly. Pick one for each, and we'll go around. We'll wrap up this thing. And also, it's like tag. So when you get tagged, then you tag somebody else. You ask questions. We'll go around the board. Hashtag Audible Live on Twitter, and this one comes in. And Matt, I'm gonna go to you first. So tag, you're it, buddy. This one comes in from @Carp57. It says, "Can we hear you speak about baby D-Jacks?" Hashtag Audible Live. I would assume he's talking about Paul Richardson. Matt, your thoughts?
Yes, indeed. That's the guy right there. To me, the reason I like Paul Richardson so much is there are numerous reasons. To begin with, when you watch him at Colorado, just lightning fast, extremely fast player who claimed to run a 4.28 while he was training, but ran more in the 4.3 range, high 4.3 range, still fast enough right there. But the thing is that he runs in control. He runs extremely good routes for a player at his development level at this stage. He can get better. There's some little things that he doesn't do that maybe but he's going to be able to learn. He can run the full route tree. You can see him play outside or inside in any system, and I think that he would do well. But what I love about him that makes a difference between him and other receivers is that he is capable of being able to make plays in tight physical coverage, plays that you would expect a guy to make and plays that you wouldn't expect anybody, whatever size they are, to make. He makes plays with players hanging off of him, taking hits after the catch. He's someone that he fights for the ball. He is ferocious at attacking the football and staying with a play even when he is getting wrapped up. He is someone that is very good after the catch. He's skilled at being able to make the first man miss. He has excellent vision, being able to cut across the field and reverse the kind of change the axis of pursuit, as I would like to say about defenders. And he's someone that the Seahawks just lauded to death when they talked about picking him. They picked him they had a first round grade on him, and Pete Carroll and John Schneider, when they were interviewed when they drafted him in the second round, they said, when we made the trade with the Vikings to trade down, we had to have a pick. We had to have a player that we were going to have ready and written down in case this trade didn't go through, and Paul Richardson was our first-round pick. And then we traded back twice, and then finally our lead scout was like, look, dude, let's just go pick our guy. Are we going to trade back anymore? Because you guys are starting to freak me out. We really want Richard. And they were like, yeah. And they were mad because Paul, it was Curtis Conway of the NFL Network. He was on TV earlier that day lauding Richardson, and they were thinking that Richardson was below the radar with a lot of people, and he was. But they got scared even then because Conway had him as one of his top players on the board, and Conway is a guy that works with a guy like Travell Gaines and coaches players on route running and coaches them on the skills and techniques of a receiver, and he was a fine technician himself and a very good deep threat for the Bears and for the Chargers. To me, I look at someone like Paul Richardson, and you look at all of those factors. Yes, he had an ACL tear a couple years ago, but he came back and played extremely well. The fact that he played on a Colorado team that wasn't all that great, and when you hear John Schneider kind of flub his first answer and say he was the team, well, maybe I shouldn't say that. He was the offense, And one of the things that they loved about him too is that they asked him they tried to give him every opportunity to throw his team and coaches under the bus in interviews, to say, to talk about how bad they were, and he never took the bait. He never took the bait. He liked to stay below profile. He had an early incident when he was younger that involved 2 and 3 other guys stealing a purse, I think, at UCLA, and he got kicked off the team. He was a youthful guy, made a mistake. But from what everyone says, he's a leader on and off the field now, and he's just a fine player. And when you look at his size, yeah, certainly he seems kind of thin, but Isaac Bruce was kind of thin, Santonio Holmes was kind of thin, Marvin Harrison was kind of thin, and I look at someone like Paul Richardson, and I think that he's going to be better than Deshaun Jackson. I think he's going to be, you know, and I know that it's probably a very bold thing to say, but I see him more along the lines of a mix between Deshaun Jackson and Marvin Harrison. I think that if Russell Wilson and this team can progress, you are going to see a Manning to Harrison-like combination out of those two somewhere down the line in the future, maybe in 3 to 4 years. And, you know, again, easy for me to say, and I'll be wrong, and I'll say, oh, I'm wrong, and people will go, oh, well, everybody forgot about what Waldman said, that Manning, you know, that was going to be Wilson and Richardson to the next Manning to Harrison. But I think that Richardson is that good of a route runner. He's that good after the catch, and he's that good at being able to make plays in tight coverage in a way that Jackson has flashed, but Harrison was awfully strong at. And this is the type of offense that I think is going to go into that direction. So to me, getting him in the 3rd or 4th round in a rookie draft is an absolute steal, and that's why I've been advocating him, and why we joked around on this podcast a few times, or on the couch, when Bloom was going to ask me about him, and I said, no, I don't want to talk about him right now because I'm in a bunch of dynasty drafts, and I would like to at least get him once in one of my dynasty drafts, because I know I'm picking against Bramel, Bloom, and, like, you know, a bunch of other guys who know the guys I like and dislike, and I never seem to get. So he's kind of my bet on greatness this year.
There we go. Is Paul Richardson, and that elicits quite a response out of Matt Waldman. It's great to see you fired up, my friend. And now it's your turn. Hashtag Audible Live. You got to pick a question, and you're going to toss it out to someone, Matt. Who's going to be the lucky person?
Well, I think Bloom is always very good at playing the stock market when it comes to fantasy football. I always love hearing him do his version of the stock ticker and who's rising, falling, and all this kind of stuff. So Anthony Browner wants to know who's players whose ADP you expect to rise the most by August drafts.
Yeah, I can do something like Jim Cramer stuff. Sell. Yeah. ADPs that will rise, I think. Michael Floyd, I mean, it just doesn't seem right that he's still falling to the 6th round. He already established, based on last year, that he should be higher than that. I do think that we'll probably see Roddy White. People start to come to their senses and realize that, you know, once he got kind of healthy last year, he was still deserving of the ADP he had going into the year, 2nd, 3rd round. He should not be falling to the late 4th round. I do think we're going to see somebody from the Cleveland backfield, maybe even Ben Tate, move up from their current ADP. Bishop Sankey, obviously a guy that has a chance to be going in the 2nd round by the time we get to August drafts. Rookies in general, I think we'll see maybe 60% of them fall from their current ADP, or 70%, but 20 or 30%. Jordan Matthews is another great. Jordan Matthews, I'm sure you're going to see, 3-4 round rise just on what happened this week. So I think the idea of ADP movement is a good one to explore right now. And certainly if I'm doing an MFL 10 right now, I plan on writing about it. I plan on doing them periodically, just as a sort of taking a temperature of ADP compared to the data, just because I think that it's important to be, as I love to say about the Wayne Gretzky skate, to where the puck's going to be, not to where it is or where it's been. And the ADP, when we can anticipate that, that's when we can get the drop on everybody.
Always want to get the drop.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Is that temperature oral?
What is it called? What is it called, Gene, when you put in the armpit? Axillary, or is it
axillary?
Axillary? Yeah, axillary. I prefer the axillary, just because I can go like this. And on that note, I will ask Gene a question, because Gene is sober. Gene Bramel, brought to you by Xanax. He's very level-headed about these things. So Fanny Pack King asks a question, good philosophical question. You like that?
No, you stole the question I was going to ask Cecil.
Okay, good.
But I do like Fanny, not that I don't like Fanny Pack King.
Fanny Pack King, by the way, it is Father's Day. We're all fathers here. Father's Day coming up this weekend. So Fanny Pack King, I think, is I'm glad that we get to say that coming up to Father's Day, because I think that we own it. We all own it. So Gene, yeah, the question's a good one. It's a philosophical question, basically. If value starts to present itself in the mid rounds, is it better to just take those best player available type picks? Someone like Toby Gerhart. I already took 3 running backs, but man, Toby Gerhart's still there in the 6th round. Do you find yourself just saying, I'm going to take the best player, I'm not going to worry about how my lineup is being filled out? Or do you think it's important to stay disciplined and, even though it might look like a very attractive thing, it's your 4th running back. You're probably not going to need him. You're better off taking your best tight end, quarterback, or other position of need.
At some point, you have to fill out a lineup, but it's not in the middle rounds for me. I think you take the best player available as long as you can, and I like to follow tiers. So at some point, you're going to fill out that lineup in a respectable way because it's just the way the tiers fall. Rarely, I can't think of a situation where I've ever taken, where I felt like the wide receiver depth in my tiers was so great that I was refusing to still take my first running back or first tight end or any of those things. So I think you take the best player available. If you end up with a glut of players at one position, maybe you can trade from a position of strength and end up someplace else. But I'm never in the first 7 rounds filling out a lineup or in the first 9 rounds feeling obligated to make sure that I have a tight end or make sure that I have my quarterback 1. If I like the depth at that particular tier and I can continue to stockpile good talent at other positions while I wait for the tiers to come to me at the other positions, then I think that's what you should be doing. All right, see, so that was the question I was going to have for you, because I don't think, we don't get to hear enough of your draft strategy. We always hear you talking about rookies and things. That's the one I was going to toss to you. So let me
Don't
scroll
do shots during your auction. That's Cadillac
Cecil Lammy
Williams.
draft tips. Okay, guys, we got the hashtag Cecil Lammy, hashtag Cecil Lammy draft tips. Get it going.
We have a soundbite for that one. Don't do shots during your. Yeah, I like that one.
Cadillac Williams rookie year, and I had a few too many shots, and he came up, and the bidding he was like 10, 11, 12. It gets to me 65. I spent everything I possibly could, and then got minimum. We have $10 minimums for everybody else on my team.
Nice style, though. You did it in style, though, man.
Yeah.
And he did have a good season, so there you go. Not that good, but, it's good.
Good until Gruden, Chris parried him after those first 3 weeks. Gene?
I'm leaning towards taking the easy way out here.
Armando?
Well, let's do this, though. You play in enough dynasty leagues, and I know you like rookies. There's a question from Anthony Browner wanting to know about any advice for people that are venturing into dynasty leagues for the first time. I don't think we've talked about that in a while, and I think that's a good one. We'll shy away from, if you want to know what Cecil's been thinking about C.J. Anderson and some of the other players in minicamp, lots of good stuff he's been writing, lots of good stuff he's been tweeting, good stuff today even. Make sure you're checking out his Twitter feed. I think that's a good question to compare Monte Ball and C.J. Anderson, but let's not make this a Broncos show for the time being. And any advice for people going into dynasty leagues for the first time?
Don't be afraid. It's the same thing that I say with people that are venturing into auction leagues. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to just jump in full force, because your league, it will even itself out over time. If you think, well, I don't have the owners, my guys in my league, they're not serious enough for dynasty. You'll find out. You'll find out quickly. And the fact is, you may be assuming, well, they're too busy for dynasty, or we don't keep up with football in the off season. No, you're going to find with the draft community getting bigger, the buzz around the draft getting bigger, now the draft possibly being on the move every year, that's going to fire people up across the country. So as football gets bigger and it becomes, people always say, oh, you cover football, you must have a lot of time off. No, there's like a little bit of time in July, a little bit, where you get to take a breath, but really don't be afraid. That's my best advice that I can give you in dynasty leagues. And when you set up your league in terms of roster space, in terms of how many players you're going to carry, if you're going to have any sort of practice squad or what have you, keep in mind the level that your owners are, and you're going to know how serious your owners are. But the fact that you should be promoting this year-round, because most of the leagues, if you're in it with coworkers, we're going to be around them anyway all year long. It just makes it better. and it makes trading better. It makes all the off-season activity that you can have. In answering your question, Gene, about what do you do if you've already stockpiled? Well, trade. How active is your league? If you want it to be more active, let's say it's grown a little bit stale, then shake it up with a dynasty league, with an auction league, with an IDP league. Shake it up because your owners you're going to find the fit eventually. Will you have some rough patches? Sure. But don't be afraid to push the envelope in terms of your league size or your league rules, because at the end of the day, fantasy football, one, it's a distraction, and two, it's just fun. Okay, so make it as fun as you possibly can, and who wouldn't want to have fun all year long, not just during football season? So there you go. Hashtag that's what I think. And the show is now concluded. We thank everyone for jumping on board here. Sigmund Bloom, no tornado, no basement time yet.
No, it was all southwest Austin. I'm central, so I know I've seen some Twitter updates from people out there. Everyone stay safe. Texas Twisters, no fun. But Audible Live, lots of fun.
I've been to your house dozens of times. I didn't know you had a basement.
Yeah. Well, that was because if there was ever a reason that you ended up down there, you would never saw it coming.
It puts the lotion in the basket.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Or else it gets the hose again.
There you go. Matt, your thoughts to wrap things up tonight?
I'm just glad that we have, the opportunity to do this and every week and gather around with friends and talk football. It's always a great time, and the questions that we get from everybody online is just fantastic.
Cheers to you, my friend. And Dr. Gene, you get to tie a bow on this thing as well.
I will be on time next week. I will not be sitting here at my desk waiting for somebody to ask me to the prom.
Nice.
You're always going to be first to be asked to the prom, Dr. Gene, because you're popular. That's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate everyone for listening out there, for watching on YouTube, for subscribing to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/footballguys.com. That's DOTCOM. And everyone out there for signing up for our free daily newsletter. Listen, you want to become a Football Guys Insider, get your free daily newsletter right to your inbox. We don't have a life. You do. You can go do what you do and keep up with the NFL better than anyone.
We're jealous.
There you go. Mike Mayock told me at the Shrine Game, he was like, you need to get a life. No, I just need to do more football. So there you go. Our free daily newsletter. Get it, subscribe, check it out right to your inbox. Keep up to date. All the fantasy and football information that you can shake a stick at. Also check out Football Guys Insider Pro and sign up for that as well, our Football Guys Players Championship. Just overall, footballguys.com. We thank you all for watching, all for listening. So, for the great Sigmund Bloom, the fantastic Matt Waldman, and the fine Dr. Gene Bramel, I'm Cecil Lammy saying thank you very much, stay tuned, and oh yeah, stay frosty.